question, the Mishnah tells us that a woman could acquire herself in one of two ways, either through a get, through divorce, or through death, her husband becoming a widow. So the Gemara asked, after a woman is permitted to remarry after she receives a divorce, tells us explicitly, because of the Sefer Krisus, the husband writes a document of termination, and she's permitted to marry another person. But how do we know that the death of the husband, when the husband dies, how do we know that's sufficient to allow her to remarry? That was the question. Take a moment. Go ahead. Listen, Pasuk says, he will write to her a document of termination, right? And she will go and marry another man. That's the Torah says. That's explicit. After a woman's divorced, she's permitted to remarry. Now the question is, Gemara says, and Misa Sabal, how do we know with the death of the husband that permits her to remarry? Gemara says, Svaru. It's logical. What's the logic? He prohibited her, right, because of the relationship that he has, but if he's no longer here, so she's permitted. That's like the concept. Right? Kibolo kachpolto, the kashering process. As it absorbs, that's the way you expel it. It absorbs through water, you're able to extract it through water. Okay, not quite. Someone says, Varayus. The asalu v'lo sharilu. Right? You have the forbidden sexual relationships, incestual relationships. The person prohibited the woman, and although he divorces her, although he dies, she's still forbidden. Arayos. What's the halacha? Chamoso. Man marries a woman, he has a mother-in-law. Now he divorces his wife. Is he permitted to marry his mother-in-law? She's no longer his mother-in-law. But nevertheless, because since initially she was his mother-in-law, once a mother-in-law, always a mother-in-law. Forever. That's arayos. Elo b'domer achmono. So what's the basis? Gemara is retracting. It's not, Elo is always a retraction. Elo b'domer achmono yivoma. There's a concept of yivoma, there's a mitzvah of yivoma, that if the brother dies childless, she'ein lo bonim, asura, a yivoma where ein lo, it's really ein lo bonim, ein lo bonim, it's not really ein lo bonim. Woman was previously married, she could have children. Ein lo bonim means she has no children from the husband, from this man. The man that had children, she's not permitted to remarry, right? She's not, it's a Torah violation. She's not permitted to marry until Yibum is performed. But if she would have children from the husband who had died, Mutera, she's permitted to remarry. There's no love. But Dilma says, no, maybe if she has no children, she's not permitted to marry until she has Yibum. Mishari of Yovam, and the Torah permits her to the surviving brother, to the Yovam. V'yeshla bonim, but if she has children, meaning the deceased had children, l'kuli alma nami asura. Not only is she forbidden to the surviving brother, she's forbidden to everyone. That a woman, once she's forbidden, she remains forbidden. She's an Eishes Ish. Eishes Ish means she's the wife of a person. As we said, regarding all other rayos. So where do you know that once the man dies, she's fully released from that relationship? That's the question. A widow is not permitted to marry. Kohen Gadol is not permitted to marry a widow. Holocoin Hejichario. So what's the inference? But a Kohen Gadol. But it seems to, who's not permitted to marry a widow? A Kohen Gadol. But what about an ordinary Kohen? He's permitted to marry a widow. But if a widow is not permitted to anyone, how's he permitted to marry a widow? It's evidently safer there that a widow is permitted. The husband, the death of the husband releases the woman, permits her to the world. right? Good, good. Well, that's an incestuous relation. Not because she's a widow. Even if she'd be a divorcee, it'd be the same thing. Because she's the wife of the brother. That's the reason. Right? Kohen God will love l'kuli alma bet. So the Gemara says, no, Gemara says, Dilma, no. The Kohen God will be love. If the Kohen God will should marry a widow, he's a violation of the love. He's subject to malchus. L'kuli alma, but anybody else who marries the widow, basei. So Rashi explains that. Yesterday we didn't have a chance to do Rashi. L'kuli alma basei, Rashi says. What does the Torah say? What does the Torah say? V'yotzav hois l'sha'acher ayidei gerushin. Torah says when a man divorces his wife, it says v'yotzav hois l'sha'acher ayidei gerushin v'lo ayidei miso. The inference is when is she permitted l'sha'acher? That's if she's divorced. But if through any other means, such as death, she's not. The shilcha v'zu lo l'acheres mashma. This woman is sent off is permitted, but another woman who's widowed is not. Any other woman. And we have a principle, that a negative, a prohibition which is derived from a positive, although the inference is negative, that's considered asay. So if a man would marry a widow, an ordinary person, the Kohen Gadol is in violation of a los asay. So you're subject to malchus, but anyone else is a violation of an asay, but it's a Torah prohibition. So again, where do we know that a widow is permitted after her husband dies? Logic, right? What you just said is not logical. That's the answer. You think about it. It's not a kal v'chomer. What's the kal v'chomer? The Torah says if you want to terminate a marriage, the one who created the marriage, he terminates it. What's the mechanism to terminate a marriage? The instrument of termination? Divorce. The man died. Did he terminate it? Hashem took him out of the picture. But maybe the kinyan which he brought upon her, that lingers on beyond his existence. Right? So therefore she's still not permitted. Wait, good question. Good question. Wait one second. One question. I was waiting for that. Yesterday we mentioned Rashi in Ksubis. The Rashi said, why ain't get lachamiso? So Rashi says, because ain't ames megarshim. Mentioned yesterday, Rashi. That a person who dies cannot divorce his wife. So the obvious question is, what is he saying? The reason why the get cannot take effect after the man dies is because a man who dies cannot divorce. There's nothing to what? To terminate. Right? The get is to terminate a relationship. There's no relationship. The moment the man dies, there's no relation any longer. Right? So I had mentioned that Toseh explains that we're speaking about a Yevoma. So Yevoma, there's a Zika. There's a Zika. There's an attachment between the widow and the surviving brother. That means there's a remnant of the marriage which stays on, and now the brother takes over that relationship, takes over the relationship of the deceased. That's the concept of evil. It's not he's creating a new marriage. He's solidifying what's left over from his brother. He takes over. He's in the stead of the brother. Okay, that's the concept. So why did he give a get? He gave a get initially because he didn't want his wife to fall to evil. He didn't want her to fall to his brother. But the only problem was he said the get should take effect after he dies. After he dies, it's too late. Why? Because a person who dies where he has no children, the marriage, his effect, it lingers on. So why can't he terminate it after he dies? The answer is because the person, once he dies, can no longer terminate that relationship. That relationship you can only terminate with a get as long as you're alive. Right? That's how the Sos explained Rashi in Ksubis. That's what Rashi. We're not talking about a person gives a get where he has children. It's understood. The moment he gives the get is not a get because there's nothing to terminate. There is nothing to terminate because that's the Gemara here. A widow is permitted to remarry. Gemara is going to show why. So why is she permitted to be married? She never received anything. The answer is because there's no trace of the past. But if there are no children, the Torah says no, it lingers on. There is a trace. And that does not allow her to remarry. Right? So the brother takes over that relationship. This is the concept. Okay? What is the value of the connection to the deceased? If he has children and the brother's not permitted to marry her, and the Torah says she's permitted to marry others, why should anything linger on? Why should the Torah want anything to linger on? It has no relevance. That original marriage today has no relevance anymore. It becomes totally obsolete, right? But if there's a yavam, it's not something obsolete. We want him to intensify that relationship, to revive that relationship. I'll give you an example. We once mentioned, there's a Chuvas of Rashba, we normally say, that if you want to marry a woman, you have to have 80 kiddushin. Right? You have to have witnesses who witness the act of marriage. Kiddushin. If there are no witnesses, the marriage is not valid. Right? You need witnesses. So there's a question, what about for Yibum? Do you have to have witnesses for Yibum? Or even without witnesses, she's considered married. So the question is, the Gemara says that what? That the witnesses, they create the kiyume. The witnesses create the entity of marriage. Without witnesses there, the marriage doesn't happen. But Yibum does happen. So Rashba says, because Yibum is not what you're creating. There's a zika. There's a continuation from the previous relationship. When he does the act, that act brings it back to the marriage. It's like reinstating the original husband's relationship. It's a reinstatement. To create something which never existed, that you need aiding. But over here, it's not creating something that never existed. It's reinstating what still exists, or intensifying what exists. For that, you don't need aiding. But what about if there's no surviving brother? Right? There's no surviving brother with their children. Everything's irrelevant. Right? Good. There's a Rashi in Gittin. What's the halacha? A person wants to give a gift, and he says the gift should take effect after he dies. Andrew, this is relating to what you asked. He wants the gift to take effect after he dies. So the halacha is it's not a gift. Gift's a piece of property. Gives a person a deed. He says, the moment I die, the property should be yours. So the halacha is the property doesn't transfer. Why? So Rashi says, because the estate is no longer yours. Because the moment the person dies, the estate is transferred to the children, to his heirs. You can't give away something that's no longer yours. As long as you're alive, you're able to transfer what you own. But the moment the person dies, it's gone. It doesn't exist. You can't give away what's not yours. So that would be similar to say that after the man dies, he can't divorce his wife because there's no longer a marriage. There's nothing to terminate. So that's how it differentiates. When we're dealing with an asset, why could you not give an asset away after you die? Because the moment you die, it's transferred out of your domain. It's no longer in your domain. It's not yours. A person, what about a person who's a ger? Right? The Gemara says in Basra, nichse ger. Person converted, has no children. No children. He has no heirs. Now he dies. What's his whole estate? The estate becomes hefker. It's ownerless, right? Because he has no one. Well, he should retain it. Who's he? What is it? What is the concept of a kinyan? When we speak about a kinyan, meaning ownership. Ownership means it has relevance to utilize, to exercise those rights. But if there's no human being around any longer, and he has no heirs, so his interest in his properties have no longer relevance any longer. Therefore, they become hefker, becomes hefker. I'll give you an example. If a person makes a neder, okay, makes a neder that no one in the world is permitted to benefit from his assets, not him or anybody in the world from his assets. Now, and then afterwards he goes and he's matir neder. He's matir neder. So what is haTorah? haTorah means that retroactively the neder never existed. It's an annulment of the neder. That's what haTorah is. I'm undoing what originally was done. That's haTorah Nedarim. It's not the neder exists until now, and it doesn't exist going forward. No, when you matir neder retroactively, it's as if the neder was never enforced. Right? That's haTorah Nedarim. Okay? So now a person goes initially makes a neder. All my assets are not permitted to anybody. Then he's matir neder. So the machlokes rishonim, the Rashba and the Ran in the Dorim, are the assets hefker. If he's not matir neder, everybody agrees the assets are all hefker. The question is, if he's matir neder retroactively, they were never hefker. They were never. The neder was never a neder. Was he annulled it? The question is, are they hefker? So what's the? So Ran explains, or the way it's explained, that what is a kinyan? Let's say a person has an ox. The ox kills, and Bezdin rules shora niskol. The ox has to be stoned. Torah says a shora niskol is isur no. You're not permitted to benefit from it. As machlokes rishonim isur no, something that you're not permitted to benefit from, is it only not einu b'rishuso, or it's not? It's einu shelo. Understand? Somebody comes to you around, is it only beyond your reach, or it's no longer yours? It's machlokes rishonim. What's the halachic difference? Court rules that an animal's a shor and niskol. Now the animal goes and damages. Are you liable for the damages of the ox? If the ox is still yours, but you're not permitted to benefit from the ox, you're responsible. You have to watch it and be responsible. It shouldn't cause damage. But if it's no longer yours, it's no different than an owner's ox. You're not responsible for the ox any longer. Why is it einu shelo? Just because Bezdin ruled that it has to be stoned, and he's not permitted, and then you're not permitted, why is it not shelo? Well, what is the concept of kinyan? What is a kinyan? I acquire something. What does the acquisition? What does it give me? It gives me rights. What are rights? What's the meaning of a right? To utilize it. To utilize it at every level. What about if the Torah says you no longer have the rights anymore? Your rights have been stripped. At no level are you permitted to benefit from it. So the initial kinyan, what intrinsically do you have in the object anymore? Well, but I originally had, but they become obsolete. The right, the innate interest which you originally had has no relevance any longer. The moment it has no relevance any longer, it's no longer yours. That is the position of Isra Shelo, Einu Shelo. Isra, it's not yours. It's no longer yours. That's the idea. So so Ger who dies, what is the value of his original kinyan, his acquisition, or his ownership rights? Because he exercises rights over what he owned. What happens now? He dies and leaves no heir. What is the value of those rights? If he has an heir, so those rights cause that he should pass it on to his heir. That's what those rights, that's the value of those rights. But if he has no heir, what's the value of the rights? He's no longer here to exercise the rights. And he has nobody to follow him. So what happens? It's hefker. It's hefker. No, but that's not a right. A right's value is only if you could exercise them. If you can't exercise, there's no right anymore. Right? So what I'm saying, it's the same idea over here. So the Rand explains, if a person makes a neder, it's not permitted to himself or to the world. So no one is permitted to benefit from this particular object. So, but he originally had a kinyan. So if somebody now would steal it, would steal the object that he says no one, not him, not anyone else is permitted to benefit from, is he a ganav? Is he a thief? He's not a thief. Why? Because I'm only a thief because you have an interest in the object. But if my interest in the object no longer has relevance anymore, because not I, not anyone else is permitted to benefit from, so if somebody else can benefit from, it's only me not. So my rights have relevance because I can determine could somebody else benefit or not benefit. Because it becomes hefker. Because the original right no longer has any relevance anymore. Because it's hefker. Oh, wait. So now there's a question. What about if he's matir neder? What about if he's matir neder? So if matin neder, it's as if the neder never existed. So you would say, logically, you'd say, so it's not hefker. Because now it's been revealed that the rights have value. The other position is, but since in the actual reality, as long as the neder is in effect, you could not exercise those rights become obsolete. I'll give you an example. It would not remain hefker. Give you an example. We had, the halacha is, there's a machlokas, hasra sofik shmei hasra, lo shmei hasra. If I forewarn a person that he shouldn't do something wrong, it's questionable if what he does is wrong or not. There's a machlokas whether he receives malchus. To receive malchus, you have to need a forewarning. So, for instance, if you leave over the noser, you're not permitted to leave over sacrificial meat till dawn, beyond dawn. You're not permitted. You shouldn't leave over kochim until the morning. And if you do, you're in violation of a lav. So the question is, does he receive malchus if he violated this law? We have the Gemara malchus. So one opinion is, everybody agrees he doesn't receive malchus. The question is why? Is it because it's lav hanitik lasei? Is it because this lav is associated with asei because it says if you do, you burn it? So the burning, the asei, is a correction on the lav, right? Or it's because lav she'im bo masa in lokan olav. That since you're in violation of the lav of losim and bokim in a passive state, you're not being proactive. Therefore, one doesn't receive malchus for lav she'im bo masa. Okay? Another question is, what about, it's asura sofik. If you forewarned one, don't leave it over till morning. But there's always the next moment. It's not simple. It'll be in violation. If asura sofik lo shmei asura, so he wasn't forewarned. If he's not forewarned, he doesn't get malchus. He doesn't receive malchus. So Tosei asks a question. Mishnah says that if a person is a nazir, says Iranian nazir, he's not permitted to drink wine. Now the person goes, he starts gulping wine. So it says for every revius he drinks, and they say al tishte, al tishte. And you have witnesses warning, you're not permitted to drink, and he just keeps guzzling the wine, keeps drinking it. Al tishte, it says he receives malchus for every revius that he drank. Every revius he drank, he receives malchus. It's a Mishnah in malchus. So Tosas asks, if we're of the opinion hasra sofik lo shmei hasra, how do we know someday he may be matin neder? And if he's matin neder retroactively, he was never a nazir. So how do we have a right to give him malchus? It's uncertain. At the end of the day, he's going to be a nazir because he always has the ability to revoke the neder from its very inception. That's Tosas' question. You following the question? So Tosas answers because there's a presumption. The presumption is he's not going to be matin neder, and we deal with the present. We don't deal with the if maybe. We don't deal with that. We deal with the reality. Reality now is a nazir, and we have a principle of chazaka. Presumption says he's a nazir now. The probability he will remain a nazir. That's the reason. Because that's clear. No. Because the base of a neder is, if I would have known, I wouldn't have made it. Right? That's the concept. The Gemara says like this. What's the difference between haTorah? It says, we had Rashi's brought in the beginning of Matos, a father or a husband is mefer neder. Right? There's a term is haforas nedarim. Bezdin is matir neder. In Hebrew, what does haTorah mean? Unties it. That means they undo it from its very inception. Hafora means they terminate it. Somewhere says, what is hafora? Hafora is megas gaius. They sever it at this point going forward. That means until that point it existed. Because how does a husband or a father, how do they annul the neder? They say, we don't want it to be. It's irrelevant what the woman wanted. It's not she says, if I would have known, I wouldn't have. The husband says, the husband has the right to terminate the neder. That means until this, so what's the halachic difference? The Gemara says, if a man goes and, let's say, drinks wine, and subsequently he's matin neder, Bezdin cannot give him malchus. If a woman was a nazir, and she drank wine before the husband was mefer, and subsequently was mefer, since when she drank the wine, the neder was in effect, she receives malchus. That's the difference between haTorah and hafora. The Gemara uses the term megas gaius. You sever it. That's get like a get. A get is megas gaius. When the husband gives a get, she's married to that point. The moment the get is given, it terminates. It actually severs it. It's cut. The relationship is severed. That's what happens. Okay? What? No, that's what we're explaining. No, that's what we're explaining. No, in reality, that's what we're explaining. If, in fact, there's no children, so then the kinyan has relevance even beyond. It's like an heir. Why does the heir inherit the father's properties, his children? Because he had a kinyan. What's that kinyan relevant to? To pass it down to his children. But a ger who has no children, the kinyan it has no relevance. For himself, he can't exercise rights. And he has no heir, so if that's the case, everything becomes obsolete. The kinyan, the innate interest he has, it no longer has relevance. So I'm saying, by yibum, why is there zika? Why, when a man dies, why is there zika? If he is childless? Because the kinyan has relevance, because it has to be perpetuated by his brother. But let's say they're children, it has no relevance. Wait, I'm told according to the Maskana, that a widow is permitted. But the Havmina was, maybe it's like a Rayos, that once that relationship was there, it's like every Erva, Chamoso, every one of them. She's no longer the mother of your wife. She's no longer your wife. Yet Torah says she's still Chamoso, or she's still Eishes Ochiv, although she's not the wife of the brother any longer. To be an Erva, one doesn't need a trace. As long as it once existed, she's locked into that mode of prohibition. The past is the past, not the present. So good. So Eishes Ish is an erva, correct? Right. That same thing. That's what the Gemara said. There is no kinyan today. Correct. No, it's interesting. There's a halacha of Psulei Mikdoshim. The halacha is if you consecrate an animal and subsequently gets a mum. So the halacha is you're supposed to redeem it. After you redeem it, you can eat it in a contaminated state. You can benefit from it, but gizan avod is not permitted. But to shear it and to work with the animal, or to milk it, you're not permitted. It's based on psukim. But you redeemed it. Okay. What about if a person goes and consecrates an animal that's a balmum? That's a balmum. Meaning, it already had a blemish. You're not supposed to, but he did it. So what do? It has to be redeemed. That animal, after you redeem it, you can work it, you can shear it, you can milk it. So Rashi explains what's the difference. One is called kodem muma lehegdesha, the other is kodem hegdesha lemumo. If the hegdish preceded the mum, then you can't shear it, you can't work with it. But if the blemish preceded the hegdish, then you can. Rashi says, what's the difference? He says the difference is because the first case, it had relevance that the animal itself could have been brought as a korban. It had kedushas haguf. It was elevated to a level that it could have been brought as a korban. It was consecrated unblemished. Now it becomes blemished. There's a trace of that kedusha, although the Torah permits you to partake of it because it can't be brought as a korban, but because it was elevated to that special level, there's a trace of that kedusha that remains with the animal. Because of that trace of that kedusha which remains, you're not permitted to work with it, you're not permitted to shear it. But if the blemish preceded the hegdish, this animal, the consecration, was never at the level that it could have been brought as the korban. It wasn't associated with the mizbeach. As a result of that, after you redeem it, because it never had that dimension of kedusha, you're permitted to work with it, you're permitted to shear it. It's called kedushas domim. It should be used to purchase a korban. If I consecrate a table to be used to purchase a korban, that's called kedushas domim. The values designated for the purchase of a korban. So balmum, its value is designated for the purchase of an animal that's not a balmum. That's unblemished. Right? That's the difference. It's the same thing. It lingers on. The kedusha. The kedusha lingers on. If it was unblemished initially, and subsequently you can't use that animal for working. Because it's still, you can eat it in a contaminated state, not a problem. Because there is a degree of kedusha.
The other
Because why doesn't it have kedusha? because it never had relevance to the Mizbeach. Because since when you consecrate initially, it was about mum, it could have, that animal never had a history that it could have been brought as a korban. So after you redeem it, you use the table as whatever you want. You want to play ping pong on it. It's not a problem. A man wants to make a commitment, he's going to bring a korban. I consecrate this table that its value is designated for the purchase of a shlomim. So that's called kedusha's domin. The table has the kedusha. It's meant to be utilized not for the refurbishment of the Beis Hamikdash, but to purchase a korban, a shlomim and olam. Right? That's called kedusha's domin. So what do you have to bankdish anything? Give money to the Beis Hamikdash, let them do what they want with it. You consecrate it. The consecration is a designation. Afterwards? No, because the table could the table be brought as a korban? Which animal? No, when did it receive the mum? After you consecrated it. So initially, what was the dimension of the kedusha of that animal before it received the mum? It was connected to the mizbeach. I'm explaining why. Why is there a trace? If you're way up there, even though it's been demoted, but where's it coming from? No, it's a provision. You're not permitted to consecrate an animal that's not fit for akrava. You're not. No, because the table has no relevance. It's just designating the asset to be used for that. An animal, which is the species that could be brought as a korban, consecrating it where it's not fit, that's you're doing the wrong thing. A table which has no relevance to be brought as a korban. No. I'm explaining to you. The original animal could have been brought. It could have been actually brought as a korban. You redeem it. You redeem its value, and that value is used for the korban. You give it also. It retains its kedusha. And what's its kedusha? To be used to purchase a korban. That's the value of its kedusha. No, you're not permitted to use it. Until you redeem it, you're not permitted to use it. It's like the animal that has the blemish. Correct. It's a designation until it's redeemed. Same thing with the animal that's a balmum. You're not able to bring it as a korban, but you're not permitted to benefit at any level until it's been redeemed. Kasher v'maisa. Yeah, right, exactly. The only reason. Okay, so we're still in this quandary here. What is the basis for a woman when she becomes a widow? Why is she permitted to remarry? Okay? Now, the Gemara says maybe it's true. She's not, there's no liability of Koris. Right? Because she said, but there should be nasei. So the Gemara says, Hayase my aviditake. The Gemara is saying, we wanted to learn from a Kohen Gadol. So the Gemara says, no, maybe a Kohen Gadol is a lav, but anybody else is nasei. No, we didn't knock that out yet. No. Right? That's where we're holding. How do we know she's permitted? Maybe there's a provision, an Isser Aseh. On that, the Gemara says, Hayase my aviditake. Why should the Torah allow an Aseh to remain? To prevent her from remarrying. Initially, before the husband dies, what was the provision? It was Kores. What was the liability? Kores or Mrs. Bezdin. Now, all of a sudden, after she dies, that we lower it, it's Aseh. Hi, Aseh ma'avitim. What's the purpose of this Aseh? Ida, Hanyo, Mrs. Abal. If we say that the death of the husband was effective, and that's why it's no longer considered adultery, that there should be a liability to Kores and Mrs. Bezdin, Tishri Lagamri. Why does the Torah stop with the Aseh? She should be totally permitted. As there's no longer Kores, there's no longer Mrs. Bezdin, she should be totally permitted. Idlo lahanyo Mrs. Abal. And if we say the death of the husband means nothing, tukma bilsa kamaiso, so she should retain original status. Chamoso. Chamoso, if a person has relations with his mother-in-law, even though the wife is no longer, he's not married to the woman any longer. It's Sreifa. So we see death doesn't change her status, right? It still has the intensity of that erva. So if we're saying that the original marriage, the death is ineffective to change her status, what's the Mrs. Besdin? She should retain status as she is. No, it's less. So that Gemara asks, but if she's less, she should be permitted. Why does it only stop at less? She should be totally permitted. To be continued.